Going live. Greetings from Costa Rica and welcome to today's Costa Rica Real Estate Forum number 18. My name is Matt Rosenstiel. I'm owner-broker of Coldwell Banker Pacific Realty here in Guanacaste, Costa Rica. The topic today is home inspections, and specifically we want to talk about when they go wrong. Lately, I've had clients who have seen deals destroyed through the home inspection process. And in fact, there have been transactions where very likely if things would have been done differently, both approaching the home inspection and digesting it afterwards, you could have seen very happy buyers still closing on a home or a lot or whatever we're talking about. But because one part of the process or another was botched, a home inspection can absolutely lead to a failed deal here in Costa Rica. And so this topic is not only important to buyers, but it is also very important to sellers and investors in general. Because if you want to efficiently buy and flip and promote Costa Rica real estate, you're definitely going to deal with home inspections. And because everything is very different here than in the US, we don't have licensed home inspectors. Really, nationally, there isn't the tradition of having an absolute unionized, standardized home inspection process. Things can get thornier, and the ways in which inspections can ruin real estate deals might not even occur to people who haven't been involved in real estate here for a long time. So first and foremost today, we're going to be positive. I really want to cover what to look for in good home inspectors here in Costa Rica. We'll go over their qualities and how I would go about looking for a home inspector. We'll talk about home inspections in general and how they fit into the Costa Rica real estate process. And then we'll talk about when they go wrong and when it's the inspector's fault, or sometimes when home inspections go wrong and actually the inspector isn't the one to blame. If you're joining me and would love to chat with us today, we have a special opportunity. You can hold up your phone to your computer screen today with the camera function. And if you'd like to log in to live chat, to ask me questions, to put a listing that you'd like to inquire about, to give your feedback, you can use your phone, put the camera function up to the QR code that you see currently on your screen, and that will enable you to start commenting, participating in this Costa Rica Real Estate Forum from the comfort of your own phone. Anyhow, before we get much further, I'd like to start off with a quick word from myself. Greetings from Costa Rica. My name is Matt Rosenstiel, also known as Costa Rica Matt. This is my YouTube channel where I talk about everything related to moving to Costa Rica. Greetings from Costa Rica. Welcome to my new exclusive listing here in Guanacaste, Costa Rica. Here in Costa Rica, Playa Junquial, Playa Tamarindo, Costa Rica real estate, a pura vida lifestyle. What the heck? Just kidding. So whether you're interested in buying real estate in Costa Rica or you just want to learn more about this beautiful country, do be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thanks very much for watching. Let's talk about home inspections in Costa Rica today for our first, for our real estate forum here. Again, if you'd like to log in and chat, be sure to hold up your phone, scan that QR code, click on or tap the little link so that you can get into the chat and you can sit there and message, mostly with my assistant, Dimitri, who's going to be handling the chat, and perhaps myself. We've got some people walking by as we get started here. First and foremost, again, this is an important episode both for buyers and sellers because home inspections in Costa Rica should do two things. First, yes, they should protect the buyer's interest. 100% they need to give a buyer the idea of what they're getting themselves into. But second of all, they serve a huge purpose for the seller in providing a pretty good expert opinion on a property. And sellers, yes, you need to be thinking about how your home is going to look on an inspection report someday when a nervous buyer is dipping their toe into Costa Rican waters and deciding to invest here. Home inspections in Costa Rica can generally have a very different role than they do in the US or Canadian real estate buying process. And primarily, the one big difference between inspections here and inspections up there is that very rarely are you going to see a price adjustment negotiation that follows a home inspection here, or rather in much rarer circumstances than you do in the US or Canada. Up there, yeah, you find out that the water heater is near busted. You get 3 quotes from standard contractors. You come to an agreement and $2,000 is knocked off the sale price. Down in Costa Rica, that happens a lot less often to begin with. And really, the reason it does is because most of the Costa Rica properties that are for sale are going to include notable flaws or things that should really be improved if we're talking about a US or Canadian standard or the codes of construction. Properties get worn and torn by their renters. Costa Rican sun, rain, everything beats down. And also, obviously, you have different construction practices here than you do up in the US and Canada. So rather than going after a price adjustment, normally, really the home inspection is a step in the process in which the buyer is aiming to understand exactly the condition of the property. Perhaps they're going to ask the seller for some adjustments. You know, if they find a fuse that's blown, if they find that there should be GFCI protection, etc., they may request those changes. But more often than not, the home inspection is only a step for the buyer to really understand what they're getting themselves into, and not going to be a price adjustment process as you would see in negotiations in the US or Canada. What should you look for in a good inspector here in Costa Rica? First, I've mentally wanted to walk back on something that I started off with at the beginning of this episode. There aren't licensed home inspectors in Costa Rica. That is false. There are licensed civil engineers in Costa Rica who can absolutely have licenses for everything that they do. Home inspections are included in their services. And as civil engineers, they have a wide academic background that has also been tested going through school, etc. Costa Rican civil engineers can also be people who are very focused on the technical aspects, really the blueprints, the theoretical aspect of a property, and they might not have quite as much experience in actually dealing with properties and the real world on the ground issues that come up with them. I've seen civil engineers who could design a brilliant house, bridge, make public works. They're people who have incredible talent. But then if you actually ask them to look at an AC unit and tell you whether or not it was functioning properly, they'd have no idea where to start. So in Costa Rica, if you're considering looking for a good home inspector, it can't be as easy as it may be in the US or Canada to simply go with a licensed, highly recommended professional, because you might find a licensed, highly recommended professional here who frankly only has that technical background knowledge and might really miss some obvious on-the-ground stuff. Good inspectors here, in my opinion, have direct personal experience with the construction process in Costa Rica. You need people who have been on these job sites, hopefully for years, if not decades and decades, watching how Costa Rica homes come together. Because honestly, the difference between how they actually come together and how they're theoretically supposed to be built is enormous. And you need a civil engineer, or rather, you need this home inspector who's been there to see those cages, the rebar that's down in the foundation, someone who understands exactly what's actually happening in the walls. Because oftentimes in Costa Rica, they're not going to be able to get a really good look. If you're looking at a concrete house here, obviously you can't easily see if there's anything wrong inside, especially given that most home inspectors here are not going to be working with fancy infrared scanners and the kind of technology you might see elsewhere. So to go back, good home inspectors in Costa Rica, the best in my opinion, have experience with construction themselves, and their experience in learning this topic, understanding homes and doing inspections, stems not only from their understanding of the electric systems, plumbing, etc., but also from their real-world experience seeing homes built and watching that process. Also, another key component that may seem logical, good home inspectors in Costa Rica should also have lived here a very long time when they're available. I know there are amazing contractors, people who've learned the craft in the US, and they've moved down to Costa Rica recently. Some of them, frankly, are the best available home inspectors here. But a lot of times I see some reports where it's clear that they might not really understand some of the nuances and quirks of Guanacaste. For example, we had a home inspection report where the inspector was very concerned about termite nests that frankly are one of the most common species in this dry tropical forest. And looking around at the nests in any tree, in any property, it would be absolutely impossible to even propose controlling them. All you can really do is keep them out of your house. That sort of local knowledge that a home inspector can bring to the table. Yes, you might have somebody who knows structural engineering, plumbing, electrical, everything, but some quirk about that property that is just Guanacaste or Limon or whatever it is, that new inspector who hasn't lived in that area for a while might not have the greatest clues to what's going on. And they can frequently bring up issues that needn't be brought up in an inspection report. So let's talk more about when inspections go wrong here in Costa Rica, and there are two sides of this coin. Number one, there's the problem when an inspector doesn't spot anything, doesn't do a good job, they miss problems with a house or condo, and an unwitting buyer buys something that they think is better than it really is. The other problem, and that frequently can happen in any part of the world, is that the home inspection results in a report that scares the buyer off. And frequently that report can scare a buyer off when they don't even have context for what we're really talking about. So let's talk about the first issue and the most obvious one. Inspectors who do not find enough stuff or leave you vulnerable to a liability when you acquire your property. First, I want to note that even the best inspectors in this area in Costa Rica, I have not yet seen an inspector with a 100% clean record of catching every single issue. I even had a luxury home sell right at the end of the pandemic. We had the two inspectors that I consider to be the best people available. One guy who's a builder in Costa Rica, and one who is the North American licensed, really academic, super technical background. Both of them did inspections of the same house, and both of them missed that the back of a cabinet had termites in it that eventually went through the other cabinets. You do have even these great, thorough, very professional people who miss things. And what I want to say is that if you have an inspector who misses something, Yes, your recourse in Costa Rica is almost non-existent except for providing negative feedback about that inspector, but you should also temper any negative feelings that you have about that inspection with what I'm saying. Nobody catches everything here, and it can be especially impossible to catch a problem, for example, like a leaky roof. You finish a home in January when you've got 5 months of zero rainfall coming. In October, all of a sudden, you get 8 inches of rain in a single 2-hour period, and that roof is suddenly tested in a way that it's never been tested before. The entire volume of water could be above some of the measures that the architect was planning to waterproof the roof. You've got just so much water torrentially coming down at that point. No good home inspector in their right mind could have ever done something to find that kind of leak. Some will even get up on the roof and spray it with a hose and try and get a diagnostic that way. The difference between a hose and 4 inches of rain per hour is the difference between the sun and lighting a match, to give you an analogy. So inspectors will frequently miss something. Don't hate your inspector if they have, and be prepared when you move to Costa Rica to witness that caveat in action across the board, whether it's home inspections, on and on and on. People can frequently miss small problems. So let's talk about, in order to avoid an inspector missing some of these problems, I have to say one of the easiest techniques is, if you're able to be there personally for the inspection. I hate to say this, but the inspectors that I love the most, even the great ones, do a different job when they're being held accountable for how fast they're doing it. If the paying customer or their representative knows how long that person is in the inspection right off the bat, I'm afraid to say you're probably going to get anywhere between 10 and 50% more of that person's time. I have seen inspections where I only represent a seller and a buyer's representative is not present, and boy, do we fly. It's not in my interest to really have everything documented that might be wrong with a property. The inspector is an independent party that I'm not responsible for directing or saying, hey, you better check the circuit panel in the bathroom. I just sit by. I'm the seller's representative with my hands crossed. And if that person wants to spend 15 minutes going through a 7-bedroom house, that's just cherries for me so that I can get on with my life. And I know our inspection report is going to come back without much detail. So first and foremost, if you or your representative can be there for a home inspection, I'm sorry to say that, especially with all my home inspector friends, hold them accountable, or find a way to say, call me when you're leaving, or, I've got cameras, and so just make sure you lock the gate as you go out and send me a message. Even something like that could be a subtle way to say, I'm going to know how long you're at my property, and I'm the one that's going to be writing you a check. How big could that check be? Depends on the property, obviously, but in our market, a quick, small property, a really 1-bedroom, straightforward inspection can be as low as $500. A larger luxury property can be $1,000. $2,000 if you're also going to bring in the electrician who's certified, if you're going to take some other fancier drone images, etc. $2,000 is about the absolute limit that I've seen for a massive home to be inspected here by a good professional. So we've covered how you can prevent your inspector from doing a very quick job. Honestly, the other point, besides from being there personally, is clearly to find the right inspector. We talked about how you want to find somebody who knows construction, who's been in Costa Rica a long, long time. Check for references. Find an inspector's 10 most recent clients if they're willing to share with you. Your realtor should have very good references, and your realtor should also be alerted to the fact that you don't want the home inspector to be brief, though those things may seem very obvious. Now let's talk about the other side of the coin. When home inspections are too thorough and they ruin a deal. That sounds like exactly what a realtor how they would phrase it, too thorough. Lots of home inspections here. For example, the inspiration for this episode, by the way, was an inspection done on a listing that we're about to take for $139,000. This Tico house that is utterly what you would expect from a 20-year-old or 25-year-old property here in Guanacaste, Costa Rica. I'm sure that when it was built, you were dealing with a local crew of guys who had learned construction through the government programs. They had probably done, construction for their family. They had helped out their uncle with a few sites. And basically, they knew how to pour concrete. They knew how to lay block, knew how to lay out a job site, etc., and they could get a house. And especially because most Costa Ricans, this pura vida lifestyle, the quality that comes with not caring about stuff that doesn't matter, most Costa Rican homes, they get a roof and they get walls and they're darn happy. It's not really the stressing out about making sure that you've got safe electrical and hot water and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. It's how can I build a nice house on my property? It's got to have a little porch for me to enjoy the outdoors. Has to have a good roof because it's going to rain like crazy, with some minimum requirements. The inspection report for this house was dozens of pages long. And it contained an overview of everything that you would expect to be wrong with a house that is 25 years old and wasn't even built that well or really built with the standards we're thinking of in mind in the first place. We're talking about a rural Costa Rican farm family's beloved little house that they put on their Guanacaste lot. And we have a 48-page inspection report where, it looks like everything is cracked. The tiles are, of course, because over 2 decades, that foundation that Don Juan and his sons laid has settled a little bit. There were other things. There's no hot water. The electrical, nothing is grounded. What would surprise you about that? It's cheaper to wire things with just 2 wires, your neutral and positive, instead of grounding everything. So home inspectors, this is an extreme case that I'm rambling on about, but there are plenty of cases where, yes, home inspectors have this goal to simply document everything that is wrong with a house, and that report, taken entirely out of context, is then presented to a buyer. One of the worst mistakes your realtor can make is to present an inspection report to a buyer as an email. Here you go, let me know what you think. Or really just having the inspector send it directly without any possible opportunity to sit down and discuss with him what was found. In my ideal scenario, I actually work with an inspector, Doug, who's got enormous construction experience. He, a lot of times, will have a face-to-face meeting and actually go over a yellow steno pad of notes on the house instead of presenting all of a sudden a 50-page PDF that has red flag, yellow flag, yellow flag. It's much better to sit down with someone and say, well, you're buying a 25-year-old Costa Rican home that was built for a farm family and that they basically did things to generate a roof as fast as they could. That context can really be important, and it's something that can't only be done just when the report is already coming out, but it's something that your realtor should have done by preparing your client's expectations well in advance. And that's sort of the last topic I want to touch on here, which is inspection reports can ruin deals, and it's not the inspector's fault. You absolutely have circumstances where the inspector presents what you would expect to find on a property, and the reason a deal falls apart is that no one had the correct expectations coming into the inspection process in the first place. If your buyer has been told, yeah, we'll just look at what's wrong with the house and we'll take thousands of dollars off after in negotiations. Or if your buyer has been told, or if your buyer has been told, yeah, the house can be completely perfected. We'll touch up everything that you want after the inspection. Well, inspection happens, buyer submits 4 pages of corrections, and the seller says, well, what were you possibly talking about? We know exactly that this house was old, beaten up, had bad electric systems and plumbing. That's why we're not asking $100,000 more than our price. So really, the process of setting people up to go through an inspection successfully is almost more important than finding the right inspector to present information correctly, because on the buyer's side, really you should understand going into a home inspection that you're doing this to really get a laundry list of what needs fixing. You want to understand more about the property. And ideally, you want to have an opportunity to sit down with a builder or the inspector themselves and say, talk to me about these issues. How much do they cost me? Are they gonna recur? Do I need to really be worried about this property? And you're deciding whether or not you want to take on that home or walk away. From a seller's standpoint, they also need to be prepared that, yeah, a lot of times inspection reports in Costa Rica are going to include every single detail of a home. And if you want to pass with flying colors, there are some incredibly simple things that you can do to make your home inspection go smoother. The simplest tip to avoid a blown inspection: first, make sure that all of your light bulbs are working in the house. Yes, that sounds crazy, but guess what? Most inspectors do not have time to climb up to every fixture in your house, screw in a light bulb, and test to see whether the light is working. Their report can only be done, they're going to charge you $500, but they can only do it in 3 hours. They're going to walk around and turn on and off all of the lights in the house, and any single light that's not working could be a ding on your report, even though it was as simple as you getting on a ladder and changing the light bulb before the inspector got there. The same goes for all of your major appliances. Make sure your ACs are working. It could be a $30 repair standing between you and your air conditioning working on the day of inspection. You want one less ding on your report by calling Juan Pablo out here in advance so that the inspector gets there, turns on the AC, and it's done. Number 3, you also really have to make sure that you've got access to some important utility areas. I've been to inspections where, yeah, it took a while to find the electrical panel. And if we hadn't been able to do that, the electrical report would have been one giant red flag, essentially. I couldn't inspect this, so I can't certify whether or not it's a flaming, mess or something that's good. Beyond the electrical panel, some properties do have sub-panels. You want to try and give your inspector access to the septic tank. Most of them are not actually going to put a camera down in there to look around, but they're going to want to know where it is. They want to see its condition, and they're going to be able to try and get an idea of whether it's working properly, at least if they know where it is and they can look at the access to it. This can be a big thing in Costa Rica because every property has its own septic tank and leach field. The access to that septic tank is usually protected by, some people even bury their septic covers. Excuse me, got a little burp coming. You see all kinds of weird setups where the septic tank is, somebody had an idea for their Blackwater treatment plant idea back in the day. And yeah, there's a tube that runs out to a back corner of the property where you've got bananas planted. Make sure that whoever is representing you as a seller at the inspection can get the inspector access to everything and take care of all those tiny little things that would just be one more red flag. A window latch doesn't work, spend the $20 to get it fixed. The key in the door, The inspector reports I couldn't even get into that bodega. Make sure the keys are working. Have it completely with the logical fixes and access for the inspector, because I have seen reports come back where there were 15 lights that didn't work or couldn't be confirmed as working. Those 15 dings are now 6 extra pages in a 48-page report on a $139,000 beat up Tico house that if everybody would have understood from the get-go, it is what it is, the home inspection wouldn't have ruined the deal, and perhaps people would still be happily on their way to a closing. Anyhow, I appreciate you joining me. See you next Friday. Be sure to subscribe. Love y'all and peace.